I want to welcome you to the Dallas Independent School District STEM Environmental Education Center. If you're watching and you have not registered, please go to www.tiny.cc/6-8 restoration and sign up, please. During this virtual field trip, students will recognize level of organization in plants and animals, including cells, tissue, organs, organ systems, and organisms. Students will differentiate between structure and function in plant and animal cell organelles, including cell membrane, cell wall, nucleus, cytoplasm, mitochondrion, chloroplast, excuse me, and vacuole. Students will also recognize components of cell theory. Mr. Monroe will talk to you about the levels of organization. Mr. Dominguez will do plant cells. Mr. Ramirez will cover animal cells, and Ms. Ram cover cell theory. You cannot talk to us verbally during this program, but you can go to www.tiny.cc/question-answer, send in your question, and we'll do our best to answer it during the program. If not, we'll send the answer to your teacher.
Good afternoon, students. My name is Mr. Monroe, and we're going to be looking into levels of organization. Now, you could look at that and say, well, we're going to be talking about corporations, business. No, we're going to be talking about life. And we know that the basic or the smallest unit of life is a cell. We're going to talk about how cells and living things are organized. Now, when we look at organization of cells in a living thing, you know, living things can either be unicellular, which that means they're made up of only one cell. Probably a good example of that would be bacteria, amoeba, paramecium, things that probably we would have to use a very strong microscope to observe. Now, what we are going to really focus our study on is some of those that are what we call multicellular. And this means they are made up of many cells. Now, there are some things, you know, some common asked questions about cells and their organization in living structures of living things. And one of the questions that comes up, and maybe I can answer that for you, you might want to remember this. The question is, a lot of people ask, are all cells alike? And you'll find that out as we do our investigation. And then they often ask, a type of tissue made up of, are they made up of the same type of cell, or are there different cells that make up tissue? So we're going to clarify those two questions at least, and probably many more. And you've heard me say already that the cell is the basic unit of life. And I don't mind sharing this with you. Cells are specialized by their size and shape, and usually their size and their shape that's associated with a very special job that they do. For example, a skin cell would be different from a cell that would be used in the muscle tissue. And I don't mind telling you this, that actually when we look at levels of organization, there are 5 levels, 5 real basic levels of that organization in living things. We start out with the cells, next comes the tissue, next comes the organs, then the organ systems, and then the organism itself, okay? Now let's talk about the cells again. We know that cells do a very special job. So therefore, the type of tissue that is found in a living thing is going to be made up of cells that are specializing for that specific tissue. Now, tissues are made up of the same type of cells because guess what again? They're there and they're specialized to do a special job. If we look at humans, and not just humans, most animals, we have 4 kinds of tissue in our bodies. Epithelial, which is cells that make up the outer skin, and then we have muscle tissue, and that muscle tissue can be either cardiac muscle or it can be smooth muscle. And I bet you guys didn't realize that that old heart that you got up here pumping, and I've learned that the hard way, that is muscle. have to take care of that muscle, okay? And then we have tissue that is what we call connective tissue. And then we have something else that's very important to living things, the nervous tissue that is associated with our nervous systems, okay? Now, the same type of cells make up specific tissues. And once we move from the tissues, we go into what we call the organs. Organs are made up of different tissues that work together to do a specific job. You heard me mention the heart. The heart is an organ, okay? You also have your lungs. That is an organ. And those body parts do very special jobs. And I know in the past, when learning science or biology, one of the favorite things I used to hear students talk about, we did it when I was in high school, and that was to dissect animals so that they could observe these very special organs that are found within an animal. Well, frog was one of the favorite ones that we used to do. But since then, I don't think we use the frogs very much. I think here lately they've been starting to use baby pigs, which any type of dissection, I have a hard problem with, okay, even though I teach science. Well, I've got a diagram. Let me move this plant just for a minute. I've got a diagram or a poster with a frog. And we're looking at the internal parts of that frog. Of course, we know that there's certain tissue with certain cells that are going to make up the skin, right? Epithelia. But that heart is right here, located right here. And if you were actually dissecting a frog, most of you probably would be looking to find that heart, which is a cardiac muscle. And then you would probably be looking for, maybe your teacher would have you looking for what we call smooth muscle. Now that smooth muscle would be probably found in the intestines, okay? But you would be on a search trying to find examples of all those organs that were mentioned and the type of tissue that makes up those organs. Now, finding the cells that make up that tissue might be a little hard, right? Now, remember, they do a specific job. Now, those organs, guess what? They are part of a higher level of organization that we call organization of organ systems. For example, the circulatory, the reproductive, the digestive, the nervous, and the respiratory. Those are all organ systems that humans have. And those systems do a particular job. For example, circulatory, it deals with that cardiac muscle pumping the blood through our veins. Reproductive, that deals with the ability to reproduce, okay? Digestive, that deals with the metabolism of changing food into energy. And respiratory. Respiratory has a lot to do with us exchanging gases, such as taking in oxygen and passing it through the parts of our body that need that oxygen, and then exhaling and getting rid of the carbon dioxide that we breathe out. So organ systems have a very special job, and they're allowed to do their special job because of the organs that make up the organ system. And then the organs are working because of that very special tissue that does that special, helps that organ do that special job. And the tissue is made up of cells that are specialized in doing the jobs of the organ and the organ system. So you kind of get an idea of how well it is kind of put together to work to make our bodies work, or make a living organism that is multicellular work to stay alive, okay? Now, on the other hand, we know that plant cells, they may be a little different. You're going to learn a little bit more about that on your virtual field trip today. But I'm going to give you just a brief general description of what a plant cell does in its organization. Now, again, the plant cell, that's the basic unit of life in a plant. And then we know that special plants go into special tissue, and that special tissue goes into organs that do a specific job for that plant. For example, a plant has a system of roots. Certain cells, certain types of cells are going to make up the tissue that makes up those organs that we call the roots, okay? Then we have the stem of the plant. Guess what? Certain cells are going to make up the tissue that makes up that organ, which is the stem of the plant, because the stem is going to do a very special job for that plant. And then we have the leaves, which is another body part that special cells will make up the organ of leaves, because those leaves, they have a very special job that they do. And their particular job, leaves' job, is to produce the food that gives the plant its nutrients. Now, going back to the roots, there's a very special job that the roots do, if you really think about it. The roots, first of all, they're going to anchor that plant in place. So they kind of have to be strong, right? And then those roots also are going to be pulling in water from the soil and nutrients from the soil to also help feed that plant and keep it healthy. Well, remember, are all cells alike? Think about that from what you've heard me say and what I've tried to show you. And the other thing is, a type of tissue is made up of different cells. Is that true or false? Well, if you decide either one of those answers, be ready to explain your answer. Now, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Gorman. So if any of you have any questions, I bet he can answer those for you. Oh, one more thing. I forgot to show you Hoppy. You know, I feel good about not having to dissect Hoppy. So I'm going to get him out and show him to you right quick. Hoppy is an American bullfrog. And this would be the little fella that maybe some people are still doing it, but some people get a kick out of dissecting a bullfrog just like this. Of course, they're not alive when you dissect them, but all those things that I was talking about on the diagram or the poster of the bullfrog, oh, Hoppy's got. He's got that heart that's right up in here, and he's got, and down here in the intestine area, he's got those smooth muscles. So everything that I kind of mentioned that the bullfrog had, this guy's got to keep him alive. So let me get out of here because I've run out of time. You guys have a good day the rest of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. A question did come in. What are the major levels of organization in the body, from the simplest to the most complex? Cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and the human organism. Again, thank you, Mr. Monroe. And now, Mr. Dominguez is going to tell you all you ever wanted to know about plant cells.
Hey guys, it's Mr. Dominguez here with the EEC, and today I have a very special guest. He is a redfoot tortoise. His name is Redfoot, and him and I are going to be talking about plants, something that he enjoys every single day. But more specifically, we're going to be talking about plant cells, and we're going to be talking about the cell structures that help a plant thrive. So before we go back to the classroom and I show you guys what those structures do, let me give you guys one last look at Redfoot, because he is an amazing creature. He is beautiful, isn't he? And he loves plants, plant cells. So let's get back to the classroom and let's get started. All right, guys, so we're back indoors with my plant cell. And we are going to be focusing on some of the organelles that this plant cell has that are similar to animal cells and some that are unique to plant cells. Now, before we get started, I want you guys to remember one very important thing. Both animal cells and plant cells are eukaryotic. So they do share many similarities, but plant cells do produce energy a different way through photosynthesis. Now, because I am only going to focus on a few of these organelles, What I'm going to do for you guys is I'm actually going to build a model myself out of clay, and as I build the model, as I build each structure, I will talk about it in detail and let you guys know whether animal cells also have that structure. So let's get started making our model. All right, guys, we're starting off with something that is unique to plant cells, and that is the cell wall. Animal cells have cell membranes. The purpose of the cell wall is to provide structural support and protection. It also acts as a filter. It is tough, flexible, and sometimes rigid. All right, guys, up next we have the nucleus. The nucleus is an organelle that is found in eukaryotic cells. So that means that it's found in both animal cells and plant cells. You can think of the nucleus as the brains of the operation. It contains the majority of the cell's genetic material. This material is organized as DNA molecules. What I just drew is the cytoplasm. All eukaryotic cells have a cytoplasm, so that means that both animal cells and plant cells have a cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is a thick, water-based solution in which organelles are found. Substances such as salts, nutrients, minerals, and enzymes, or molecules that are involved in metabolism, are dissolved in the cytoplasm. The next organelles that I placed down happen to be some of my favorite, and they are unique to plant cells. They are called chloroplast, and they're green for a reason. They contain chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is what gives plants their beautiful green color. Inside chloroplast is where photosynthesis takes place, and you guys probably already know that photosynthesis is how plants are able to convert solar energy into the energy that they need to produce food. The last organelle that we're going to cover today in our plant cell is the vacuole. And you can think of the vacuole as the storage structure in a cell. It can hold food for later use or waste for removal. Vacuoles are much larger in plant cells than in animal cells because they store in the plant's water. So if a plant is looking kind of droopy, it's probably because the vacuoles are shrinking as a result of water loss. So there's actually an interesting fact about vacuoles and the pressure that they create against the cell wall of a plant cell. So I'm sure that you guys have probably experienced biting down into a vegetable like some snap peas or maybe some celery, and you guys hear that crunch. So that crunch is actually a byproduct of that pressure that the vacuole is exerting on the cell wall. All right, guys. So in summary, plant cells and animal cells are both eukaryotic, meaning that they share a lot of the same cell structures for the exception of some organelles like a plant cell wall and a plant's chloroplast. And that has to do not only with the plant's structure and what it needs to hold itself up, but also because the plant has another method of producing energy, which is photosynthesis. I hope you guys enjoyed your virtual field trip. I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Mr. Dominguez. I think Redfoot was certainly enjoying those plant cells. Now, we do have a question from a student, is what's the major difference between the plant and animal cell? Plant cells have a cell wall, animal cells do not. Chloroplast enable plants to perform photosynthesis to make food. Plant cells usually have one or more large vacuoles, which Mr. Dominguez showed you the big large thing he made, while animal cells have smaller vacuoles, if any at all are present. And now Mr. Maris is going to tell you about animal cells.
Hello, my name is Ms. Ramirez, and in this segment, we're going to be learning about animal cells. So before we start, I actually have an animal friend for you guys, because after all, she is an animal and she's composed of many cells, and she is a eukaryotic organism. So let me give you some clues to who this animal might be, and then I'll take her out. So she is bipedal, meaning she has two legs. She is warm-blooded or endothermic. She belongs to class Aves, which means she has feathers covering her body. She lays eggs, and she is an omnivore. So think about what animal this might be, and I'll go pull her out. If you have visited us before, you probably know Pepper, the blue silky chicken, and she gets that name because she has a blue patch of skin around her ears, and the name Silky because if you were able to touch her, she would feel soft like silk. Now, since she is an animal, she is eukaryotic. So I'm going to go ahead and put our animal friend out. And we'll continue on with our presentation. So let me share my screen with you guys. I do have a couple of essential questions for you guys. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to answer these two questions. The first is, are animal cells prokaryotic or eukaryotic? And you should be able to explain that. And the second is, you should be able to identify at least one example of an organelle in an animal cell and explain its function. So, of course, we heard earlier that animals are eukaryotic. So what exactly does that mean? So all eukaryotic cells have cell membranes. They also have cytoplasm, which is the organelles are suspended in that cytoplasm. And they also have membrane-bound organelles. And the genetic material is contained in a nucleus. And that is the most important part, is that eukaryotes have a cell nucleus, and animals are eukaryotic. We are animals too. We belong to class Mammalia, so we are also a eukaryotic organism. So what we're going to do, I'm going to switch to my iPad because we're going to do an augmented reality exploration of an animal cell. And this is using the Cellular app for Apple. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my computer screen share and screen share my iPad. It might take me a little while to get that iPad screen share going. So while I'm trying to start that screen share, see if you can list or name as many organelles for an animal cell as you can. So go ahead and talk to a partner beside you and start listing or naming off those organelles for an animal. So while y'all are doing that, let me pull up my augmented reality. There we go. Might take just a second. So here we have our animal cell, and we're going to take a look at some of the organelles that are suspended within that cytoplasm. So the first thing that we're going to start off with is going to be the cell membrane, also known as the plasma membrane. So see if you guys can spot that. Let me see if I turn my camera around, if it'll help it a little bit. But here we have the plasma membrane, and it has a very important job. It surrounds the entire cell, and it is a protective and flexible barrier, and it controls which materials enter and exit the cell. Now, you heard me say that the organelles are found within the cytoplasm. So we have the cytoplasm right over there. The cytoplasm is like a gel-like substance, and the organelles are suspended in it. And it also helps to maintain some of the shape of the cell. The next organelle we're going to take a look at is called the powerhouse of the cell. So see if you can find that one here. It's the mitochondria. So the mitochondria is probably, for me, one of the easiest ones to remember. It has a distinct look to it, and its job is to convert glucose into a usable form of energy. The next one we're going to take a look at is the Golgi body, also called the Golgi complex. So see if you guys can find that there. So let's see if we can zoom into that Golgi body. And this is what it looks like. It's just a network of membranes, and it works with the ER, or the endoplasmic reticulum, to process, package, and transport proteins. The next one we're going to look at we kind of mentioned it just a minute ago, is the endoplasmic reticulum. Now notice we have two. We have a smooth and we have a rough. So the endoplasmic reticulum, they are folded membranes, and that's in which proteins, lipids, and other materials are made. Now the rough endoplasmic reticulum is studded with ribosomes, and the smooth does not have any ribosomes on it. Now I said ribosomes, so let's go ahead and take a look at those ribosomes. Let's find the ribosome in our cell. The ribosomes are where proteins are made. And again, the rough ER is studded with those ribosomes. The next one we're going to take a look at are the centrioles. See if you can find those in our cell. We're going to zoom in just a little bit. So we have the centriole. The centrioles, they kind of look like little strands. They help with cell division. And then the next one we're going to take a look at are the lysosomes. So see if you guys can find those lysosomes. And I think I see them right over here in the corner. The lysosomes aid with digestion. They break down waste and other foreign materials. The next one we're going to take a look at is at the center of this little model here, and that is the nucleus. It's sort of like the brain of the cell. Now, the nucleus is very important. It houses that genetic information, that DNA, that genetic material. And you'll see that within the nucleus, we have the nucleolus, and then we have a network of chromatin as well. So there's our little quick virtual reality of the cell. This one is a cool one because you can look at the different organelles individually, and it also has information if you would like to read the text as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that share, and I'm going to go back and share my computer screen with you guys. And that is because I have a quick little review video for y'all, and it's a little song about the cell organelles. So let me go ahead and start our screen share and play the video.
I went into a cell to get out of the rain. There was the gatekeeper, the cell membrane. I went into a cell, and what did I see? The mitochondrion, it's the energy factory. I went into a cell and said, who drives this bus? And found myself talking to the boss, the nucleus. Went into a cell to recover from a spasm and found myself swimming in some clear cytoplasm. I went into a nucleus to ask how to get home and got genetic info stored in a chromosome. I went into a cell and stretching oh so far was a thin and wavy network. It's called the ER. I went into a cell trying not to be perplexed by the packaging and sorting in the Golgi complex. I went into a cell and said, who makes proteins here? And somebody responded, it's the ribosome, my dear. I went into a cell and was feeling pretty fine till a lysosome engulfed me and dissolved me in enzymes. I went into a cell and was feeling pretty nimble till a centriole lassoed me, tying me up in a spindle.
So I hope you guys like that little song. The next one I have for you guys, we're not going to listen to it, but I do highly recommend Mr. Parr. He has a whole bunch of great YouTube videos and songs to current songs that you guys are probably familiar with. So I highly recommend Mr. Parr on YouTube. So my challenge for you guys is an on your own activity. Explore these free apps. You can put them on your Apple or your Android. The first one is 3D Biology. The other one is The Cell. And the other one is Hudson Alpha iCell. Those three are all free augmented reality apps to explore the cell. There's also a web version of the iCell. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and really quickly just bring back my little model of the animal cell. So feel free to pause the video and see if you can identify the numbered organelles that I have here as well. And that's all I have for you guys today on the animal cell. We're going to give it back to Mr. Broughton to answer any questions.
Yes, we did have a question, and it was about there's something about the animal cell. Define the animal cells. Animal cells are the basic structural and functional units of animal tissues and organs. They are eukaryotic cells. It means that unlike prokaryotic cells, animal cells have membrane-bound organelles suspended in the cytoplasm, enveloped by a plasma membrane. I think the guy with the guitar did a little bit better than I did on that. And now Ms. Schramm is going to tell us all about the cell theory.
Hey everybody, it's Ms. Schramm, and we are going to talk about the basic components of cell theory and also a little bit of the history. So let me get this popped up. Okay, at the end of my section, you'll be able to recognize the components of cell theory. Okay, so cell theory, why is this important? Cell theory laid the foundation for modern biology and microbiology. It helps scientists define the characteristics of life. Without cell theory, we would not have DNA science, we would not understand reproduction, we would not be able to study bacteria or be able to study diseases to help cure them. Okay, so the first people that really made an impact on cell theory are these two, the father and son duo, Hans and Zacharias Janssen. Sorry, I almost messed that one up. Janssen. They invented the compound microscope in 1595. So these two were spectacle makers, and so that means they made eyeglasses, and they realized that if they put one curved end at the end of a tube and then another curved lens at the other end of the tube, they were able to see things much smaller. So that is the first compound microscope. We still use compound microscopes today, but they look a little different. All right, so our next person that made an impact on cell theory was English scientist Robert Hooke. And Robert Hooke published a book called Micrographia in 1665. And he illustrated the smallest complete parts of an organism, which he called cells, which are the basic structural units of life. So I'm going to look at one of his drawings up close in just a second, but he actually named cells because it reminded him of, well, when he zoomed in, he saw tiny little boxes, and it reminded him of the rooms that nuns and monks lived in at monasteries, because they were tiny little rooms all packed next to each other, and they were called cells. So that's what he named the tiniest parts of an organism. Okay, so here on the left is a drawing from his book, and if you zoom in, like he was able to, you can see those tiny little squares or the cells. Then on the right is a more current photo of cork cells. So he wasn't far off. All right, our next friend that helped out with cell theory is Anton von Leeuwenhoek. He is known as the father of microbiology. Now, Anton von Leeuwenhoek actually wasn't even a scientist, and he didn't even go to school past elementary school. He was a linen marketer. So he sold linens and fabrics. So he used microscopes to look at fabrics up close to test the quality and things like that. But then he discovered he could look at fabrics as well. So in the 1680s, he discovered blood cells and microscopic nematodes and protists and bacteria. So he was able to see quite a bit without even having a scientific background. And he tried to coin the term animalcules, because when he zoomed in, the tiny cells looked like little animals, but animalcules did not stick. All right, so here's some red blood cells under current day microscopes and bacteria cells. So even back then, he was able to see those things under his microscopes. All right, so we have two more scientists up in the 1800s. So we have Matthias Schleiden, and in 1838, he discovered that all plants are made up of cells. And then his contemporary, Theodor Schwann, in 1839, discovered that all animals are made up of cells. So these two scientists really help establish that all living things are made up of cells. Okay, so Here is a picture of plant cells up close and animal cells. All right, so our last scientist that we're going to talk about today is Rudolf Virchow, and he was a German physician. And in 1855, he observed mitosis of cells under a microscope. So he saw the cells splitting and claimed that living cells come from other living cells. This was very important because back then, this was like mind-blowing, very controversial. People did not believe that cells were produced from cells previously. They thought they just kind of spontaneously occurred from non-living things. Like, for example, they used to think that fleas came from the sand, which we know that is not true, thanks to Rudolf Virchow. So those last three scientists, Virchow, Schleiden, and Schwann, helped compose the cell theory. So this is a classic cell theory. It has three components. Number one, all living organisms are composed of one or more cells. Two, the cell is the basic unit of life. And three, cells arrive only from pre-existing cells. So those three kind of are credited with most of the bulk of classic cell theory, but all those other scientists beforehand and their work with microscopes was really vital in coming up with these conclusions. Now, as you can imagine, our technology and our microscopes have advanced immensely since the 1600s. So modern day scientists have added to cell theory, and there are three more components in modern cell theory. So these are in addition to. So that while those other things remain to be true, current scientists contend that these are also true. So the first addition is energy flow occurs within cells. Hereditary information, DNA, is passed on from cell to cell. All cells have the same basic chemical composition. And as you could imagine, science evolves every day and advances. So there may be even more additions as we discover more. All right, so what I'm going to leave you with is, why is cell theory important? So why should we even care about cell theory? Why should we keep discovering? Why should we keep investigating cells and investing in microbiology? So what tool was instrumental in forming cell theory? And hopefully you for sure got that second one. All right, I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Gorman for any questions. Hope to see you next time.
Thank you, Ms. Ram. Excuse me. Okay, tell us about the cell theory. I think she pretty well covered it, but in biology, cell theory is a scientific theory first formulated in the mid-19th century that living organisms are made up of cells, that they are the basic structural organization unit of all organisms, and that all cells come from pre-existing cells. Cells are the basic unit of structure in all organisms and are also the basic unit of reproduction. The three tenets to the cell theory are as described below. All living organisms are composed of one or more cells. The cell is the basic unit of structure and organization in organisms, and cells arise from pre-existing scales. During this virtual field trip, students recognized levels of organization in plants and animals, including cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and organisms. Students differentiated between structure, function, in plant and animal cell organelles, including cell membrane, cell wall, nucleus, cytoplasm, mitochondrion, chloroplast, and vacuole. Students also recognized components of cell theory. Mr. Monroe did the levels of organization. Mr. Dominguez, the plant cells with red foot. Ms. Ramirez, animal cells, and Ms. Schramm did the cells. Okay, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it if you'd go to www.tiny.cc/6-8 feedback, fill out a short form and send it back to us. Thank you again. Have a great day.